These are the most interesting vintage photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. A motorcycle with a sidecar is an advertisement for the British telephone service, circa 1930. The wheelchair is styled like a giant telephone and is used to promote telephony as a daily necessity. Muhammad Ali trains in Hyde Park in London before the FA Cup final, against the backdrop of fans of the Everton Football Club, 1966. Pelé, 1974, one of the last appearances of the legend for Santos. There is a tight security ring around and dozens of camera flashes. Sigmund Freud with his mother Amalia, late 1920s. The founder of psychoanalysis, he remained deeply attached to his mother all his life. Amalia outlived her husband and almost all of her children and died at the age of 95. A modern interpretation of the marine mailbox of the 16th century. Such hiding places were used by sailors at the Cape of Good Hope to exchange letters. Messages were hidden in rocks to pass them on to other ships. Alternative designs for the Eiffel Tower submitted to the 1886 competition. Many of them offered exotic, Gothic and industrial forms, but the refined version of Gustave Eiffel won. Army specialist in audiovisual technology at a video editing station, 1973. The equipment includes reel-to-reel video recorders, CRT monitors, and analog control panels, cutting-edge technologies of the era. A military medic of the First World War with an ambulance dog. The animals were used to search for the wounded, deliver medicines, and send messages to the front lines. Peter Mayhew dressed as Chewbacca and Carrie Fisher on the set of the movie The Empire Strikes Back. The photo was taken in 1979 in the USA while working on the second episode of the original Star Wars trilogy. Mick Jagger, second from left in the bottom row, as part of the London School of Economics basketball team. The photo was taken in 1962 during his studies before the founding of the Rolling Stones. A boy rides a wooden tricycle styled like a horse. The photo was taken in the 1870s when such toys were a sign of wealth. Elderly women are playing bowls on the lawn, dressed in raincoats and Panama hats. The photo was taken in the UK around the 1950s and 1960s. The game takes place in the wet weather typical for the region. The dwelling carved into the rock is located in the village of Kandovan, Iran. These houses are over 700 years old and they continue to be used. The architecture is formed from solidified volcanic rock and provides natural thermal insulation in harsh climates. The Mississippian civilization built large, scale cities with earth mounds, the largest of which, Cahokia, had up to 20,000 inhabitants in the 13th century. These settlements outnumbered any city in the United States until the early 19th century. Loading of passenger cars onto a railway platform, USA, 1976. Transportation of cars by rail was a popular practice when travelling long distances. A German postcard from the early 20th century with a futuristic forecast for the year 2000. People walk on the water using balloons and special devices attached to their legs. Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the uniform of a Soviet officer, communicates with fans in Moscow, 1988. The actor's visit caused a resonance in late Soviet society against the background of growing interest in Western culture. An RAF Lancaster bomber amid flashes and explosions over Hamburg during a massive night raid, 1943. Operation Gomorrah became one of the most devastating in the history of World War II, leading to widespread destruction and the deaths of tens of thousands of people. An old, wall-mounted clothesline reel. It was used in apartments and houses for drying clothes indoors. The rope was stretched to the desired length, fixed, and after use, it was retracted back into the housing using a side handle. A 14th-15th century manuscript with cat's paw prints left directly on fresh ink. Such autographs are found in medieval books, when animals that lived in monasteries or scriptoriums accidentally left traces on the scribes' work materials. The practice shooting of British anti-aircraft gunners during the Second World War. The target is a mock-up of an airplane moving along rails, simulating an air attack. The installation is a bolt-on Paul turret with 4 machine guns, 103. An unusual entertainment from the middle of the 20th century is underwater racing with alligators. The masked participants lead the reptiles along an improvised track at the bottom of the pool. A photo fixator with a photo finish sign is waiting for the winner. A drill on the British Railway before World War II. The employees of the railway depot are fully practicing their actions in the conditions of a chemical attack. Lifesavers promo car in the shape of a giant candy. USA, circa 1940. Such machines were used in street advertising campaigns to draw attention to the brand. Sony electric rice cooker, 1946. It was the company's first product, a primitive device with aluminum electrodes and a wooden bowl that heated unevenly and often overcooked rice. Yuri Gagarin and German Titov before the first ever human orbital flight. The photo was taken on April 12, 1961, on the way to the launch pad of the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Gagarin became the first person to fly into space. Playing tennis on a grass court in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania, 1905. The colour reconstruction provides a rare opportunity to see the everyday entertainment of the early 20th century in the USA. British military medics from the Royal Army Medical Corps, RAMC, practice in chemical warfare suits. Great Britain, the Second World War. The exercises included full protective equipment against toxic substances, including airtight suits and gas masks. McDonald's menu, 1976. Prices surprise the modern viewer. Big Mac, 49 cents, cheeseburger, 25 cents, French fries, 20 cents, milkshake, 25 cents. At that time, McDonald's was already a recognizable brand, but it still maintained the accessibility and simplicity of the fast food format. An early aviation enthusiast is preparing to experiment with jump flight, armed with huge folding wings resembling bat membranes. Such attempts to take off from a hill were made at the beginning of the 20th century as part of amateur research on space movement, often without understanding aerodynamics, but with great enthusiasm and faith in the dream of flight. The set of books, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, is decorated with a visual progression of the destruction of the column. Each volume depicts an architectural column in varying degrees of destruction, from the whole on the first volume to the fragments on the last. Photographer William Bridgman captured while working at high altitude in New York, 1930s. He is hanging from a safety rope, holding a bulky Graflex camera in his hands. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher visits the Trinity Sergius Lavra in Zagorsk, now Sergiev Posad, during his official visit to the USSR in 1987. In the picture, she lights a candle in an Orthodox church. Actors of the movie The Princess Bride, USA, 1987. From left to right, Wallace Shawn, Mandy Patinkin, and Andre the Giant. The movie became a cult thanks to the unusual characters based on the novel by William Goldman. US 1st Army infantrymen moved through the snow-covered Krinkelter forest in Belgium during the Ardennes Offensive. Winter, 1944-1945, World War II. The operation was the last major offensive by Nazi Germany on the Western Front. A Colorado Gold Rush-era train arrives at a small station, circa the 1870s. The locomotive is used to transport gold, miners and equipment through Rocky Mountain areas. The depot building and local residents are in the foreground. A street in Skagway, Alaska, circa 1897, during the Klondike Gold Rush. In the foreground is Clancy's Saloon, a typical gathering place for prospectors, hunters, and fortune seekers. The city was formed as a transit point on the way to Yukon gold. A boy with paralyzed legs, David Hensley, participates in fundraising for the construction of a hospital for polio patients. USA, 1948. He sits on the fence with stiff braces and a tin cup for donations, demonstrating the effects of the epidemic that has affected tens of thousands of children in the country. The night interior of the Fatburger Diner in Los Angeles, circa 1972. The chain was founded in 1947 and quickly became iconic due to its atmosphere and portion size. A wedding photo taken around 1900 in the municipality of Sogndal, Norway. The picture shows the groom Lars Eider and the bride Gertrude Leiter, surrounded by guests dressed in traditional costumes. The Sagrada Familia Temple in Barcelona, 1905. A view of the early construction phase of Gaudi's iconic project, which remains unfinished to this day. Frida Kahlo paints lying in bed in the 1950s. Due to severe health problems, she often worked in such conditions using a special easel. A pamphlet with marriage advice for young girls, written by a suffragette. Great Britain, 1918. The document urges women to avoid marriage or choose men only on practical grounds, emphasizing a sarcastic view of the gender roles of the time. German soldiers are resting and tidying themselves up at a makeshift supply station. Photo from the Second World War, taken in Germany. Wagons, wash basins, and a sign Trinkwasser, drinking water, are visible, indicating an organized field infrastructure. An ancient jaw with primitive dentures, probably from the era of ancient Egypt or Rome. The teeth are held together with metal wire, which indicates early attempts at dental intervention. Such constructions were used both to replace lost teeth and to fix them. Panorama of Los Angeles in 1901. The picture shows sparse buildings, dirt roads, and an almost complete absence of urban development, a contrast to the modern metropolis. This frame reflects the early stage of the city's development before the rapid growth began. A 12th century hand grenade used during the Crusades. It was discovered off the coast of Israel in 2016. Such vessels were filled with Greek fire, a combustible mixture that was set on fire and hurled at enemies, most often during naval battles. The first bus in Moscow began running on April 18, 1922. The photo shows one of the early models used in the RSFSR for urban passenger transportation in the early 1920s. A protective plastic bra designed for women who worked in factories during World War II. It served as an element of individual protection against shocks and injuries in industrial conditions. A market in the state of Nayarit, Mexico, early 20th century. The man proudly shows off the freshly caught fish, ready for sale. Burger Chef fast food chain staff, circa 1975. In those years, the restaurant competed with McDonald's and offered popular menus, including Fun Burger for 35 cents. The camp of North Star and mountaineer miners, San Juan, Colorado, 1875. These men searched for silver and gold in the harsh conditions of the highlands, living in simple tents and manually cultivating the land. Big Lou Crampanis and Sam Hitsus practiced punches in front of their house on Richmond Avenue in New Springville, 1937. Boxing was a popular activity among working-class areas of America during the Great Depression. Winter of 1942. Residents of besieged Leningrad collect water from a burst pipe. During the almost 900-day siege, German troops were unable to take the city, but cut it off from the outside world, destroyed the infrastructure and subjected it to constant shelling. Survival was reduced to the most basic thing, to find warmth, water and food. Gold diggers in one of the Colorado mines, late 19th century. Men manually chiseled the rock in a narrow tunnel lit only by candles. It was a very difficult and dangerous job, especially in the absence of ventilation, protective equipment, and modern tools. Taylor Mill Mine Processing Plant, Colorado, 1893. The mechanism was used to crush ore during the gold rush. Lindsay's Bakery, Ohio, became famous for the largest pumpkin pie in the world. The photo shows Miss Plumpkin with a miniature version on the background of a giant. Cadet of the U.S. Civil Air Patrol at Silver Lake Airfield, California, 1944. The girl reads the materials on flight training sitting right on the tail of the plane. On January 29, 1886, Carl Benz received patent number 37435 for the world's first gasoline-powered vehicle. This day is considered the birth of the car. A drawing of a patented tricycle motor car with a single-cylinder internal combustion engine is shown. Testing of the first motorcycle with a 6-cylinder engine. The machine was used to test the capabilities of a multi-section internal combustion engine in real conditions. Early 1950s. 1994 photo shoot. The actor poses for Rolling Stone in an image inspired by the American Southwest. The shoot combines rustic surroundings and rebellious aesthetics of the 90s. Rare photo. Joe Biden in the 1960s at a festive table. The youth of the future President of the United States at home. Moscow, 1960. A former ballerina selling flowers demonstrates perfect twine at the age of 60. A rare shot merges the power of the spirit and the streets of a big city. Tom Savini on the set of the film From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996. A legendary makeup artist and actor surrounded by his own monsters, the everyday life of a horror master. German and Russian soldiers fraternize on the Eastern Front in February 1918. A rare episode of the temporary truce before the conclusion of the Brest-Litovsk peace. The reverse side of the Statue of Liberty's face, photographed during its construction in the 1870s. This rare view reveals the internal framework and copper plates before the statue was assembled and shipped to New York. Brass knuckles with the inscription, New York 1864 Metropolitan Police, are one of the earliest examples of non-lethal weapons used by the New York police in the 19th century. Such devices were used to deter riots and self-defense in conditions of increased street crime. Hugo Boss, founded by Hugo Ferdinand Boss, produced uniforms for members of the Nazi Party, including the SS and SA, in the 1930s. The orders were executed under a commercial contract. In the post-war years, the brand acknowledged this fact and officially apologized for its cooperation with the Third Reich. Men in zoot suit style suits, 1940s. This type of clothing featured wide shoulders, a long jacket, and voluminous high-waisted trousers. The style became widespread among African American and Latin American youth in the United States before the ban during the war. Park Saloon, Tripp and Malloy, Gardner, Montana, late 19th century. Establishments of this type served as centers of communication, commerce, and entertainment on the American frontier. Offers of liqueurs and cigars typical of those years are visible on the windows. Vigor's horse action saddle is a mechanical device from the late 19th century that simulates riding a horse. It was marketed as a means to improve blood circulation, stimulate the liver, and reduce weight. It was used in homes as a substitute for physical exercise. It was produced in London on Baker Street. American troops prepare for the Normandy landings as part of Operation Overlord, spring 1944. The picture shows a port in England where soldiers are being loaded onto landing ships. In the foreground are air cylinders used as pontoons or floating barriers. Richard Nixon's last meal in the White House before resigning on August 9, 1974. On the tray, there is cottage cheese with pineapple and a glass of milk. A simple meal accompanied the resignation of the 37th President of the United States after the Watergate scandal. The Plaza Hotel's Thanksgiving Day menu in 1899 included more than 100 items, from oysters and green turtle to Baltimore duck and stuffed turkey. Dishes of game, seafood, veal, lamb, more than 15 side dishes and 20 desserts were served. All portions were intended for one person. So in the early 1950s, football helmets were tested. A metal weight hit the head of a dummy or a live tester. The goal is to evaluate the helmet's resistance to side impact and prevent traumatic brain injuries. In the photo is Charles Ponzi, the fraudster whose name gave rise to the Ponzi scheme. In 1920, he defrauded thousands of investors by promising quick profits from the arbitrage of international postal coupons. In fact, he paid the old depositors at the expense of the new ones. He was arrested and sentenced to prison. In 1964, 17-year-old Randy Gardner set a record for staying awake for 264 hours, 11 days. The experiment was conducted under the supervision of scientists to study the effects of sleep deprivation. Throughout the experiment, he experienced memory impairment, concentration, and hallucinations. The photo shows the 107th Regiment of Colored Infantry of the United States, taken in 1865. The regiment was formed from African American soldiers during the American Civil War and fought on the Union side. These units played a key role in strengthening the Army of the North and became a symbol of the struggle for freedom. In the photo, a Soviet signalman from the Great Patriotic War with a field phone UNA F-31 and a PPD-40 submachine gun. The UNA F-31 was used for wired communication between units. The PPD-40 was one of the early examples of Soviet automatic weapons, which were actively used at the beginning of the war. Roman roads were built in several layers: large stones at the base, then crushed stone, gravel and paving on top. This structure ensured the strength, drainage and durability of the tracks. Many roads have been preserved for centuries and were used until the Middle Ages. A 9th century ring found in a Swedish tag belonged to a Viking woman. The glass insert is engraved with an inscription in Arabic, "For, or by the will of, Allah." This is one of the rare archaeological evidence of contacts between the Vikings and the Islamic world. In 1997, the Givenchy fashion house held a collection show right at the Moscow metro station. This was one of the first large-scale fashion events of this format in Russia. The podium was placed between the arriving trains, and the invited representatives of the fashion industry became the audience. August 1991, Moscow, attempted coup, known as the August coup. In the photo, a peaceful citizen with a bicycle blocks the path of armoured vehicles on the streets of the capital. It became a symbol of the citizens' resistance to the attempt to preserve the Soviet regime. 3 days later, the coup failed, which accelerated the collapse of the USSR. Jackie Chan in a 1980s beach photo shoot in the fashionable style of his time. He's wearing short Adidas track shorts and a bright windbreaker, a typical look of the era. The photo shows Althea Gibson, the first African-American woman to win a Grand Slam tennis tournament. The picture was taken during the parade in her honour after winning Wimbledon in 1957. Her achievements were an important step in the fight for racial equality in US sports. The map shows the travel time from New York to the USA in 1800. It took about 3 weeks to get to Chicago, 4 weeks to get to Louisiana, and up to 6 weeks to get to the Western Territories. The movement took place mainly by land on horses or carts. The instrument panel of an airplane Spirit of St. Louis, 1927. It has a minimum of instruments: compass, altimeter, speedometer, fuel level. Lindbergh flew without a frontal view, guided through a periscope. Che Guevara in Madrid, 1959. The photo was taken during his diplomatic tour after the Cuban Revolution. In the background is the Victory Arch and the inscription in Spanish, "Pedestrian Crossing." This is an 8th grade exam from the USA, dated 1912. The questions cover grammar, geography, physiology, and the basics of government. Assignments require deep knowledge and the ability to express thoughts clearly without the help of reference materials. The level is clearly higher than the modern school standard for the same age. Construction of the Panama Canal, early 20th century. The channel connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Built from 1904 to 1914, the project changed world trade. In 1958, the 49th star was added to the US flag after the annexation of Alaska. The new flag was officially raised on July 4, 1959. A year later, they added the 50th star for Hawaii. Inside the General Electric Laboratory, 1937. Workers assemble a giant electric motor or generator. Such installations have been used in power plants and in industry. Security guards check a car at the entrance to a secret facility in Oak Ridge, 1945. Part of the Manhattan Project, the development of the atomic bomb, was conducted here. Entry was strictly controlled. Cameras, weapons, alcohol and radio equipment were prohibited. Never Elizabeth Burright, 65, talks with young female riders at the Maywood Park racetrack in Chicago, 1948. She was one of the few female drivers in garrison. German soldiers, supported by an armoured personnel carrier, enter a burning village in Belarus, June 26, 1941. The picture was taken in the early days of Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the USSR by Nazi Germany. Villagers often became victims of punitive actions. Romanian soldiers at the front near Stalingrad, September 1942. Instead of the usual horses, a camel was used to transport people and goods in steppe conditions. Romania was an ally of Nazi Germany and participated in the operation on the southern sector of the Eastern Front. Relaxing on the beach in Iran before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, women wore swimsuits freely, and the style of clothing was secular and focused on Western fashion. After the revolution, this form of leisure was strictly prohibited. The photo shows the musicians of the orchestra from the Titanic, who continued to play during the shipwreck on the night of April 14, 1912. Their goal was to calm passengers and reduce panic. All 8 musicians died, but they became a symbol of courage and dedication. A faro gambling game in an Arizona saloon, 1895. Faro was the most popular game in the Wild West, fast, simple, and ubiquitous. The saloons were the center of men's lives, drinking, gambling, fighting. The punctured tire of Queen Elizabeth II's limousine, 1950s. The monarch personally checks the damage. The picture became a cult in the British press. August 23, 1944. Allied landings between Nice and Marseille as part of Operation Dragoon. Hundreds of C-47s are dropping thousands of parachutists and gear. The goal is to liberate the south of France from German troops. The fence cycle is a fictional device of the early 20th century, designed to move along the top of a fence. The design with pedals and wheels made it possible to ride along the fence. This is one of the strange and forgotten patents of the era of engineering experiments. British Police, Motorcycle Show, 1960s. Officers are building a pyramid on moving motorcycles. The performance demonstrated coherence, discipline and management skills. Catholic priests skating, 1950s. The picture was taken in a winter park, probably in Europe, a rare example of informal leisure for the clergy. Advertisement for the Magic Hat from Popular Mechanics magazine, 1920s. She promised hair growth in 30 days when worn for 10 minutes a day. Of course, the device did not work. A typical example of pseudoscientific inventions of that era. St. Peter's High School baseball team, late 1930s. We reached the final of the Catholic League. Pictured are players Mike Teague, Jack Casey, Joe Smith, Joe Shields, John Hollywood, and John Milnes. New York, 1953. Workers sought metal and scrap in a vacant lot in Midtown Manhattan. Against the background are skyscrapers and typical post-war buildings. The contrast of luxury and poverty in one shot. Sergeant Ralph Nepple, 1945, receives the Medal of Honor after being seriously wounded at the front. The photo shows the moment of reunion with his fiancée, John Moore. He lost both legs, but survived and returned home a hero. Laryngophone, 1929. A phone that picks up the vibrations of the vocal cords through the skin to work in a noisy environment. The microphone was applied to the throat or cheek. It was used in military and industrial communications. Arrested black protesters, USA, 1959. The poster reads, "If Khrushchev can eat here, why can't we?" A protest against racial segregation. Blacks were forbidden to visit establishments for whites. Arrested Mormons for polygamy, USA, 1889. Laws against polygamy were actively used against members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Despite their prison uniforms, many of them pose in shirts and bow ties, as if in a group portrait. Marling's Pond, 1935. Staten Island police tried to disperse about 200 people riding on thin ice. It took half an hour. 4 teenagers received summonses for insubordination. One of them, Arthur Brigham, was detained barefoot. Hart Boulevard, Staten Island. From above, the early 1900s. From below, 2009. Over the course of a century, the village road has turned into a full-fledged street with asphalt, parking lots and multi-story buildings. The central island with trees has been preserved, only the background has changed. The youth game in the USA, 1947. The point is to pass the ring to your partner while holding a pencil in your teeth. Entertainment required dexterity, a sense of proportion and agility, often turning into flirtation. Young Elizabeth II with one of her horses. Great Britain, mid-1930s. The photo was taken before she ascended to the throne, during the period when she was still a princess. Her passion for horseback riding has accompanied her all her life. Snogometer, 1965. Teenager. Malcolm Picard has designed a device that measures kissing tension. The couple holds the electrodes and the passion of their kiss is displayed by a light scale and sound effects. Fidel Castro with philosophers Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir during their visit to Cuba, 1960. Sartre supported the revolution, and this trip became a symbol of the rapprochement of European intellectuals with the socialist regime of Cuba. Soldiers on the march along Amboy Road in New Dorp, Staten Island, on October 26, 1912. More than 100 years later, a city bus passes by in the same place, 2019. A road reflector from the 1930s and 1940s. It is made of cast iron and glass lenses that reflect the light of the headlights. It was used to mark road edges and turns in conditions of poor visibility. It was mounted on poles, asphalt, or trees. A couple in New York, early 1960s. Elegantly dressed young people pose against a typical urban backdrop. A woman holds a man's hand, demonstrating the sophistication of fashion and the strong bond between them. African-American welders at the shipyard during the Second World War. USA, circa 1943. Women worked on an equal basis with men, replacing them in production in conditions of total mobilization. A flea trap from 17th century Europe. A cloth with a bait, honey, blood or resin, was placed inside. They were worn under wigs, clothes or as a pendant. It was used to catch fleas, especially in an era when hygiene was limited. A steam locomotive crosses the Marais Gulch Viaduct, Montana, 1883. The builders are standing right on the rails, demonstrating the completion of the structure. The wooden bridge was considered an engineering feat of its time, despite the high risk. The workers who continued the installation are visible below. A family at their home in West Virginia, 1900. The wooden hut is assembled from logs and sheathed by hand. The roof is made of planks covered from precipitation with rags. In the frame, there is a large family and domestic pigs, which indicates the subsistence economy and poverty of the region at that time. Musicians from Appalachia with a dog on the veranda, early 20th century. A man plays the violin, a woman plays the mandolin, and a dog sits between them with a direct look at the camera. Seiko T001 TV watch, 1982. The device included a miniature screen on the wrist and an external receiver connected by wire. It was one of the world's first wearable televisions, produced during the era of Japan's technological ambitions. New York, 1960. The intersection in the garment district is overloaded with pedestrians, trucks, and street vendors. Workers transport a batch of ready, made dresses directly along the roadway, a common practice in the sewing quarter of that time. A Port Morris truck from the Bronx delivers textiles to stores. Seattle, circa 1880, a school building in a wooded area typical of the Northwest Territories of the USA in the 19th century. There is a large group of students of different ages in front of the school, most of them in homemade clothes. Such schools were the first educational institutions for children of settlers in the Wild West. USA, 1918. A woman manually works on a spinning wheel near a log house. Nearby there is a dog, a churn, household equipment, and 2 guns at the entrance. A Ford dealer's advertisement from the USA, late 1960s. New cars from the 1969 to 1970 models, including the Mustang, Fairlane and pickup trucks, were offered at prices ranging from $1995 to $2,799. The possibility of immediate delivery and a choice of colours are indicated. A family from southern Ohio, 1911. In the foreground is a washing machine with a gasoline engine, which has become a symbol of technological progress in everyday life. The transition to mechanised washing significantly reduced physical activity, especially in rural areas. Desk bed, 1913. The picture shows a student relaxing on a folding desk that transforms into a hammock. Such constructions were part of experiments to increase the comfort and attentiveness of students in schools at the beginning of the 20th century. A prototype for synchronizing sound with an image, 1929. A device with 1, 2, or 3 gramophone records was connected to a movie projector and was designed to reproduce sound during a silent movie screening. The development belongs to engineer F.B.A. Princeton. Parade in honor of the 200th anniversary of the signing of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1976. Thousands of musicians, flag bearers and artists dressed in themed costumes with elements of the U.S. flag from the Revolutionary War took part in the march. Casablanca, Morocco, 1940s. A street bakery in the Jewish quarter. The bread was baked by hand and sold right at the entrance to the house. This form of family craft was typical of the urban poor and supported the community's economy in conditions of limited resources. Devices for wetting stamps, the beginning of the 20th century. These mechanical licking machines eliminated the need to lick postage stamps manually. Water was supplied through a shaped nozzle or roller, moistening the stamp when pressed. Training of U.S. Air Force linemen, 1976. The photo shows a group of military personnel undergoing training in the installation and repair of power and communication lines. The job required not only technical skills, but also a lack of fear of heights. The French citizen defiantly expresses contempt for the captured German soldiers. The picture was taken in 1944, shortly after the liberation of one of the French settlements. Soviet snipers on the Leningrad front in the midst of a snowstorm, 1943. Winter camouflage and a decisive offensive in a blizzard are an example of tactics for conducting combat in extreme conditions of a blockade. A Soviet woman watches a burning house, 1942. The scene of destruction was captured at the height of the Great Patriotic War, a moment of despair and pain for civilians trapped on the front line. Experimental amphibious hovercraft based on Land Rover, Great Britain, 1960s. The car is equipped with an air cushion and is presented to the public as part of a demonstration of promising transport developments. Despite the unusual design, the project remained at the experimental stage. The Lambretta amphibious scooter was developed in the UK in 1965 as part of an advertising campaign. The floats were attached to a standard scooter and ensured its buoyancy on the water. The device did not enter mass production and was used only for demonstration purposes. The KFC menu from the 1970s. The snack box cost only 85 cents and the maximum set of 21 slices was $5.20. Side dishes, including mashed potatoes and salads, were sold for 15 to 35 cents. Prices reflect the era before mass inflation and the popularization of fast food. Captured German soldiers captured at Stalingrad, 1943. More than 90,000 Wehrmacht soldiers surrendered to the Red Army after the encirclement of the Sixth Army. This was the turning point of the Second World War on the Eastern Front. Less than 6,000 of them returned home years later. Klapkonek, 1936. Inventor R. Handel was the first to introduce a design with a movable heel that allows the blade to stay in contact with ice for longer. It was introduced in mass sports only in 1996, which immediately led to records in speed skating. Skippy's food truck has been around for over 50 years. Initially, he specialised in homemade hot dogs and soda. In 1984, the business was taken over by Dawn Belloc, who continues the family business. In 1905, the Charles Witteman Aircraft Factory opened on Staten Island, one of the first in the United States. He produced biplanes for early aviation. Later, production was moved to New Jersey. Now there is a gas station and Dunkin' Donuts on the site of the plant. B-25 Mitchell aircraft in the process of final assembly at the North American Aviation Plant in Kansas City, October 1942. Each bomber was moved along the outer line using an international tractor. Friends, if you liked it a little, please like, subscribe, and write your opinion. I really appreciate it.